Welcome to tonight's Idaho Trails Association Trail Master webinar. Tonight, we're going to be having the Payette National Heritage Program talking to us about the Three Blaze Trail. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the Idaho Trails Association. ITA was founded in 2010 to promote the continued enjoyment of Idaho's hiking trails. So yes, this year would have been our 10-year anniversary. We tried to make October our celebration month. Hopefully sometime in the near future, maybe next year, we can have a big party to celebrate all of the great work we've done and all of the volunteers we so appreciate coming out to help us. So the foundations of ITA are stewardship, tradition, education, and preservation. Obviously, stewardship through the caretaking of Idaho's hiking trails, through our trail construction and maintenance projects. ITA likes to foster the development of traditional trail maintenance skills by using traditional trail tools like crosscut saws and pulaski. And education by educating people through webinars like this, educating our volunteers while they're out on the trail about respectful caretaking of the land, and then obviously preservation of our awesome wild places in Idaho. So just to give you an idea of ITA has really grown since it first started. I believe in 2010, they started off with like one project. And over the last decade, you can see how quickly that has grown. And our organization attributes a lot of that great work to our current executive director, Jeff Halligan, who had dumped his heart and soul into this organization to help it be what it is today. So just to give you an idea, this last year, we had over 250 volunteers who contributed nearly 5,000 hours of service. This is somewhat down from previous year, obviously with the COVID stuff, that affected everybody, but we still did a really, really awesome job this year working on 35 different projects, clearing, 175 miles of trail. And as far as I can tell, with the down trees, the logs removed, this is double anything I can find us doing in the past. So over 2,000 logs cut off the trail. That's huge. And then also with our trail monitoring program, we surveyed over 80 miles of trail in wilderness areas in Idaho. So how can you help? Obviously we invite you to become a member at any level that fits your budget. Our membership drive is happening right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Sign up for trail projects. We every year we're kind of doing more and more and broadening our scope. We have family-friendly trails, usually one-day projects that are suitable for the whole family to come out and get a taste of what trail maintenance is. Single day, overnight trips, week-long vacation trips. Call those vacations because a lot of times on those week-longs, if you're not backpacking, if you have especially stock pack involved, you will have camp cooks who are helping prepare your meals. So once you get off the trail after a long, hard day, you kind of just grab a glass of wine or a beer and sit back and relax and have somebody hand you your dinner. This is, I think, our third year doing the women only weekend. So if you're a lady and you're interested in trail work and you're a little intimidated, this is the program for you. Come out, it's super, super fun. And then now also we have our youth program that started to get going. And so if you have kids who are in the high school age who might be interested in trail projects, these are a really, really great experience for those kids. Also, if you're not so much into maybe doing trail maintenance, we also have a monitoring program. And really this means you just get to do an awesome backpacking trip and collect some data for the U.S. Forest Service at the same time. So collecting information about trail conditions, information about like use, where there are campsites, where there are user trails, if you're finding trash, those sorts of things. Get to see some spectacular country. Those are usually in like the Gospel Hump, the Seven Devils. I think this year they did a project up in North Idaho in the Selma Priest Wilderness area. And then obviously just becoming an advocate for our public lands, keeping up to date with what's going on and the respectful use of our public lands in any way you can. So you can find the Idaho Trails Association all over the web. If you go to our website, idahotrailsassociation.org. We also are on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And it's to note that on the YouTube channel, all of these webinars that we're doing have been recorded and will be out there. So if you miss one or you're new to us and you want to see what else we've been presenting on, just find us on YouTube and we'll have a bunch of videos from our webinar series there. Also, just wanted to note, if you aren't aware of it, the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation this year rolled out their Trail Supporter Program. And this is a voluntary donation-based initiative just to help secure funds for our non-motorized trail maintenance across the state of Idaho. And with that, you get a sticker. And I think the idea is you can see that it says 2020 on there. Every year you re-up that sticker and it will get a new year, so you can kind of collect those. I think that they asked that you start out with a donation of $15, but you could donate as much as you would like. And it's been a little while since this aired, but if you haven't caught it, Outdoor Idaho did a show called Trailblazers, and Idaho Trails Association was a part of that. And here you can see this is a shot of some of our youth volunteers who are out doing trail maintenance. And it talks about some other great organizations and nonprofits that they're also doing really great work on Idaho's non-motorized trails. And I'm sure many of you have heard that our current executive director, Jeff Halligan, is retiring. I'm so excited for him, see what happens. I'm sure this will not be the last we see of him. Hopefully we'll see him out on projects for years to come, and very excited to welcome our new executive director, Mel Vining. Super excited to have her, and that transition will start happening the end of the year. And so I'm sure that will shake up our program just a little bit, but I'm sure it's going to be all great things. So if you see those people or you know those folks, please reach out to them, give your congratulations. And with that, we will have a virtual retirement party for Jeff on December 17th. There will be more information about that available on our Facebook page and through our newsletter. So please keep tabs on those. And again, I did want to mention that our membership drive is happening right now. Head out to our website or Facebook page for more information on that. Membership is a great gift if you're looking for a stocking stuffer for those people in your life who love our public lands and trails. If you donate for every $25 that you donate, you get entered to win one of 6 spots on our coveted spring Hells Canyon trip. And this usually includes a jet boat. And this year, I think it's taking the jet boat up the Snake River to Bernard Creek. Also, if you set up a fundraising campaign through our membership drive website platform, you get at least one donation. You can get entered to win a pair of Bogus Basin ski passes. So you can see right now we are getting pretty close to our goal, but we have a ways to go. So for all those folks out in the interwebs watching tonight on the webinar, please consider becoming a member and supporting the awesome work that Idaho Trails Association does. So with that, that is the end of my spiel. I would like to welcome Morgan and Stephanie from the Payette National Forest Heritage Program, and I'll stop sharing my screen here and let you guys jump on. Okay. All right.
All right, thank you very much, Pam, for doing that. I think first, actually, we're just going to introduce ourselves, just the panel here. My name's Morgan Zadalis. I'm a assistant forest archaeologist on the Payette National Forest.
And my name is Stephanie Patton, and I am an archaeologist technician with the Payette National Forest, and I've been there for about 3 seasons.
I'm John Platt. My picture shows up. I'm John Platt. I'm retired, been a backpacker for most of my life, and a proud member of the ITA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Beck, and Live in McCall, and I'm a longtime trail advocate, various projects around, and most recently a bunch of projects with the ITA.
Hello, my name's Art Troutner. I live here in McCall also, and been cooperating with or volunteering with ITA for several years now, and longtime backpacker and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's my that's who I am. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. We just wanted to do that because we're going to be a little bit free form with this. But essentially at the start, Stephanie Patton and I will talk about the history of the Three Blaze Trail and a little bit of surveys that we've done. But I just want the other panelists to feel welcome to jump in and share information as we move through the presentation. So I think we'll go ahead and give this a start. Okay, great. Wonderful. All right, so tonight, Steph and I will be talking about the Three Blaze Trail history and some of our survey results. This photograph here on the bottom is a topo of the Three Blaze Trail. It's located in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. And really, I think our story here with the Three Blaze Trail really starts with the Caswell Brothers. These three brothers moved out from the Midwest and in search for gold, and in 1894 set up a camp at Cabin Creek and actually built a cabin over a time period, and were just looking for gold. They set up bear traps and were exploring in different drainages, looking and searching for gold. And in 1900, they found gold in Mule Creek. This is a photograph of them in that Mill Creek cabin that they had also built there.
All right, and I saw that there was a comment showing that my volume was a little bit too low, so I hope that maybe I'll speak louder and everybody can hear me. So in 1900, after the gold was discovered along Mule Creek, at the Overland Hotel in Boise, Edward Dewey, which is the son of Colonel Dewey, a very prominent railroad mining business figure in Idaho, specifically Owyhee County and Silver City. He purchased the Caswell Mule Creek mining claims for $100,000 with the stipulation that the Caswell brothers could continue to mine for 3 years until more of the mine was developed with further infrastructure for mills and then also access to the mines as well. I see that it's still a little bit too low. I'm not sure that I can do anything, but I will try. Okay. It's as high as I can go, so I will just keep going. This slide just basically gives a good representation of Thunder Mountain for those of you who are not familiar with the Thunder Mountain area at all. And Mule Creek is located in the drainage where you can see a giant mudslide right there. This photo was taken in 1936, well after the mining activities had occurred early in the 1900s. And then the Dewey mine was at the far right where you can see. You can go ahead and move to the next one, Morgan.
Okay, great. Yeah, so essentially with the Caswells selling their claim to Dewey in 1900, it really sparked this gold rush in 1900, which was actually relatively late for gold rushes to occur in America. The Warren Mining District was established in 1862, and in California, the gold rush there was in the 1840s. So really, this is one of the last gold rushes that occurred in American history. And so with that, there was all this hype generated as miners were trying to find the next best place to go. This is a headline from the Idaho County Press, the Idaho Klondike. And so with that, a whole bunch of infrastructure was developed, stagecoach stops, also rail lines and things of that nature was being developed in the area.
All right, and so with that infrastructure, what was already in place were some routes from the south, the southern access of Thunder Mountain area. The oldest route being from Warren, as Morgan mentioned earlier. And so basically that would be the oldest access into the Big Creek and the monumental drainages starting in Warren over Elk Summit, and then that originated in Warren from the Warren Wagon Road. And then briefly, just because these routes can be quite extensive, if you really want to go into the finer details of them, but approaching it from Idaho City and Stanley routes, you approach Thunder Mountain from Penn Basin and Johnson Creek, and then you've got obviously Chalice and Salmon City routes crossing the middle fork of the Salmon River, going up Marble Creek to its headwaters right at the Thunder Mountain District. And then with those various routes, that kind of opened up the doors for competition. And then also with the realization that there's potential from the mining, the miners and all the other mining activity that was happening in the north, people gained interest in moving to Thunder Mountain from Dixie, from Grangeville, and from that area. So this influenced, greatly influenced the construction of the Three Blaze Trail and having access to Thunder Mountain from the north. You can go ahead and switch it over, Morgan. And so this also leads us into the history of the trail builders themselves. There were, in 1900, there were 4 men with similar skills, similar desires, and they had a similar background with homesteading, packing, and then an understanding of the business of mining. The 2 prominent figures in the creation of the trail was first William Allen Stonebreaker. In 1898, at the age of 19, he started a homestead in the Chamberlain Basin, which is in the Frank Trench River of No Return Wilderness. And basically the purposes of starting the homesteading was preemptive in the sense that they needed to they knew that they could sell meat and other food products to the miners that were going to be interested in Thunder Mountain, and then also the other mining activities in the north. And then you can move on to the next one, Morgan. The other prominent trail builder was William Campbell, which maybe more people have heard of him as well. He's a Scottish immigrant who settled in the Salmon River in 1897. And actually there isn't a whole lot of biographical information about his earlier life. He was noted for building the first trail down to the Salmon River from Dixie Gulch. And he started his homestead at what is now called Campbell's Ferry on the east side of the Salmon River, the main Salmon River. The other 2 trail blazers, I guess you could say, were August Hotzel, who was also a rancher and prospector in the late 1890s in the Chamberlain Basin. And Harry Donahue was also a prospector and packer. Not a whole lot of information is actually given about those 2. And the 2 prominent figures would be William Allen Stonebreaker and William Campbell. You can go ahead to the next slide, Morgan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steph. So this is a photograph that Stonebreaker took of the slope coming up out of Campbell's Ferry in 1903. So we are actually looking at a photograph of the Three Blaze Trail that was developed from Campbell's Ferry to Roosevelt, starting to help with those miners getting across from Dixie. And one thing I just really wanted to point out with that photograph is just how steep the country is. I mean, if we think about trail development nowadays, usually we would have switchbacks in country like this, or we would just avoid developing trail in this kind of situation if we can. And so those miners were really, and trail builders were looking for direct routes to get to areas. Also noteworthy is that, of course, the trail developers designed and built segments of the trail, but we believe that portions of the trail, especially sections along bridges and things of that nature, were probably originally Native American travel routes initially. And so portions of those routes would have been borrowed and brought into that system of the Three Blaze Trail. All right. My computer's just kind of delaying a little bit with changing slides. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, great. So this is a photograph. These are a couple photographs showing what the Three Blazes looked like. So typically a lot of the trail blazes that we have now today look like a lowercase I. I was told once that that's the image of a boot print. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a fun story. But these blazes were basically 3 notches just taken out of the tree. And so that's why it's called the Three Blaze Trail. It's pretty distinctive. There's not other blazes that look like this. These are some photographs taken in the 80s of those blazes. Now those blazes, when we're looking back at some of those trees, they've closed up. And so they're a little bit harder to distinguish. But I think these photographs really help with that. So when the trail did get developed, we estimate that during the boom of the Thunder Mountain Gold Rush and Roosevelt's, the town of Roosevelt's establishment, that probably 1,500 to 1,800 people traveled on that trail. And they would have traveled year round too, not just miners, but also homesteaders and also mail carriers as well. There's some stories that are shared out there of people traveling in the winter and putting their goods in hides and dragging them behind them as they traveled on the trail. Okay, Steph, you want to talk about the town of Roosevelt?
Yeah, so I will. Basically, the settlement of Roosevelt started springing up at the mouth of Mule Creek in 1901. The early structures of Roosevelt were mostly canvas wall tents until later when milled lumber was more readily available and the structures were starting to become more developed. By 1902, Roosevelt had 1 bakery, 7 saloons, several hotels, restaurants, and other businesses, including laundry. Roosevelt was not the only town that was popping up in the area during the Thunder Mountain mining boom. There were a few others that were north of Roosevelt. One was Thunder City. Thunder City, was north of Roosevelt. Thunder Mountain City was more located in the actual mining activity in the mountain. Then we've got, also with that, there was kind of a competition for resources. One of the main resources that people sought there during this time was alcohol. So actually some of the town sites, you would have people that would go to one where they knew that there was alcohol and they would purchase that alcohol and bring it to Roosevelt to try and sell it at a higher price. That would cause some fights definitely along the way. And we'll talk more about Roosevelt in some later slides.
Okay, I just wanted to share with you some of the historic photos that we have in our archives of Roosevelt. I think it really demonstrates how much of a town it was and the vibrance and the presence that was there. It wasn't just a typical mining town where you might just have miners, but there were families and stuff established there. So this first photo, the date's unknown, but it's probably early 1900s, around that Thunder Mountain Gold Rush period. But it's of some miners exploring for gold. And here is another photograph of Roosevelt at that time. Again, just some local Roosevelt folk. We don't have names of these individuals, but it's part of our historic archive collections. This is a great one of Bill Hamner when he was 2 years old. So our heritage program received a donation of photos from Roosevelt from the Hamner family. And so this is a part of that collection. And then this is Mata Hamner. She was a mother of Bill. And I think what's great about this photo is she's on skis and it's during the winter. So it shows that people were still there during the winter and that there was recreation. It also brings up the point that people received their mail during the winter as well, and how people would get their mail were mail carriers bringing it in on skis. So it's kind of a fun photo showing the life.
All right. So in the winter of 1908 and then the spring of 1909, there was heavy precipitation, heavy snow, and due to the hydraulic mining activity that had occurred for the number of years leading up to it, it had caused a massive landslide along Mule Creek. You can move to the next ones, Morgan. One thing we kind of forgot to mention, or I forgot to mention about William Stonebreaker, was a lot of these photos that we have actually came from him, and he documented really well these events. These two particularly are from him, and this would have been just after the slide, or as the slide was happening. So these are along Mule Creek, and on the left-hand photo is along Mule Creek, which is likely the Caswell mill, the remnants of the Caswell mill, and then the one on the right is just further up the drainage. And what's interesting about this is that people didn't believe that this mudslide was going to actually come to fruition and cause a lot of harm, but it was slowly building up towards the mouth of Mule Creek. And instead of dealing with the problem as it came, the residents of Roosevelt decided to kind of wait it out. They laid some dynamite, and then by the time they wanted to charge the dynamite, it was too late. It had built up to a degree that they couldn't really reverse the changes that were happening. This caused Mule Creek to back up, and then the town of Roosevelt started to flood. This once again is another photo from William Stonebreaker. The early stages of the flooding. It's quite a good photo. I think it's the only one that we have of the actual early stages of the flooding, because you want to think that it all happened at once, because it sounds catastrophic, but there were preventative measures that people kind of ignored and either assumed that it wasn't going to happen, and clearly it did. You can move to the next one, Morgan. This is from 1950, well after the flood. And then you can see the remnants at the mouth of the now lake that had been created at the earthen dam at the end there, where it blocked the Mule Creek. One thing I also wanted to mention, that Roosevelt really was so short-lived. 1905 was its peak, because you see in 1907 actually the Dewey mine closed down, as well as the Sunnyside mine, which was another one of the Caswell Brothers claims, and most of the high-grade ore had been removed. So everything that was continuing to persist around Roosevelt based on the Thunder Mountain was definitely starting to die out already. The Three Blaze Trail was officially completed, I believe, around 1902. And so really you only had about 2 to 3 years where the trail itself was actively used and benefiting the building up of Roosevelt and then the smaller town sites. You can move on to the next one. And then this was taken in 2019 when we were doing some of our survey work, which we will talk about soon. And it was just a good depiction of going from the early stages of the floods to now what you can see. And on clear days, you can see some timber, some milled lumber, but for the most part, it's been decayed.
Okay, great. So we're really going to shift a little bit in the presentation. That was just kind of a general history overview, and now we're going to talk more about our survey efforts that we have engaged in over the last couple years. So essentially, why the Three Blaze Trail? Why is that important? Why is it interesting? Why are we considering doing surveys about the trail? And essentially, we think the trail has the potential to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And so as such, Stephanie Patton and myself have conducted more extensive research looking at our archives and our historic photos and trying to piece together a clear picture of the significance of the Three Blaze Trail to see, is it worthy of that listing? Also, what we would have to determine for that listing are what portions of the trail are still intact. And there's significant portions of the trail that we still maintain today within the Forest Service trail system. This is a topo map of an overview of the trail. The green line is the Three Blaze Trail. And as you can see, quite a few portions and a lot of mileage. I mean, the total mileage of the Three Blaze is about 51 miles. And essentially, maybe roughly 70% of it or so is still maintained. There are segments within that green line portion that are not maintained today, but we have pretty well logged and tracked where those routes went. But I want to draw your attention more to the boxes and the squares within this map. Those are segments that we have historic maps or other indications of where that trail might have been and how it differs from the existing trail system. And so we selected those areas to do more survey in. So this first section actually is along that Monumental Creek. So really it starts pretty close to the town of Roosevelt and extends north along Monumental Creek. This section's been pretty well documented previously by former archaeologists, trailblazes, trail tread, and sites that are associated with the Thunder Mountain Gold Rush. However, we were wanting to look at that that creek corridor again and really see if the trail changed from the existing bed that's maintained and went to like the other side of the creek, if we would find other trailblazes in other areas. Also survey for more artifacts or sites associated with the Three Blaze Trail or the Thunder Mountain Gold Rush in general. So our crew set out in 2019, our archaeology crew that works for the Payette Heritage Program, and we started at Roosevelt essentially. And really, this is kind of, Steph showed that photo of the lake. Well, that's what's left of the town site, but these are the remains of the Roosevelt cemetery, essentially. So we started there and we cleaned up the cemetery site a little bit while we were there. This is a stone house that was constructed in Thunder City. Stephanie mentioned that the other towns besides Roosevelt that were developed during the Thunder Mountain Gold Rush. And these are remains of a stone house from a miner that was built. And you can kind of see in the center of the two rock piles, there's kind of it's faint, but that's essentially where the chimney and the fireplace was. And we were able to ascertain where the door entry was, and there were artifacts also that we found. We looked at those artifacts, we document them, we log them, and we're able to get better dates on and know when the period of use was for that site. So as I mentioned, we were looking for other trees with blazes on them. As you can imagine, with all the fires that occur throughout the wilderness, and it's been roughly 120 years, it can be challenging to find remains. And so as we were out there surveying, we documented this tree that had these like pretty uniform markings on them that look like notches. Essentially, it could be one of Three Blaze Trail trees, but it's hard to say conclusively. This is a photograph of a meadow along Monumental Creek that we were surveying, looking for further artifacts. and things associated, also looking for trail tread. You can kind of see the backpack in the middle. We did find artifacts within this area, and we also found an old cabin footprint. So we recorded those sites. This is a photograph of a bottle base to what would have been maybe a beverage bottle or some sort of proprietary use, maybe medicinal. And it's actually rather old. We're able to use the maker marks and use our catalogs to identify when these things were made, and the techniques that were used to make this bottle were pretty old, and it occurred pretty much in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. So we were able to roughly date that footprint site to essentially that early 1900 time period when the Thunder Mountain Gold Rush was occurring. So this next map shows some other segments that we did survey along and we were looking at. So essentially, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in the lower hand box, there's kind of a creek drainage that says Ramey Creek that comes down. We're looking basically in the Big Creek drainage. And essentially we have some old maps that show the trail diverting from the existing trail that just drops straight down off of a steep slope off of Ramey Ridge, and instead goes and down to the junction with Ramey Creek. And so we went out there to survey to try and decide, did the Three Blaze Trail originally go down this ridge, which seems like a much easier way to travel than coming straight down off of the slope. Here's that old map I was mentioning. This is from 1912. As you can see, kind of in the bottom right-hand corner, it looks like the trail comes straight off of the ridge and drops down into the junction with Ramey Creek. So this is a photo from our survey. So essentially, we just hiked up that slope up outside of Ramey Creek. And along that slope, we were finding different segments of trail tread or trail bed that definitely was distinguishable from game trails. It definitely looked like there were sections that were human created where the trail would turn and maybe kind of create some switchback sort of situation, but it was only segments of trail that we were able to identify. What we also found within this section were a lot of exploration pits from miners along the way, looking to see if there was potential mineral deposits that might lead to a gold discovery. So the arrow here indicates where that trail bed was that we identified. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find any trail blazes within this segment. I mean, that's really what we're looking for as like conclusive evidence that, okay, it went this route. But I do think that there was some evidence that we did find that's promising. So when we did this survey, we also had a crew that started up from the top of Ramey Ridge and was dropping down to meet us. And this is just a photograph of the slope coming off of Ramey Ridge. And you'll see the main drainage in the back is a big creek. And essentially, the surveyors along this section weren't able to really find any trail tread left, if there was any, from the Three Blaze. I want you to note that there's a kind of a clearing in the distance up on a hill. This next photo, so this one here, our surveyors did document this tree as potentially being a tree with three blazes on it. You'll see that there's some notches taken out, and this was found on that kind of bald hill that was in the distance from the last photo. Okay, now, so I think we're pretty much going to move into talking about our partnership with Idaho Trails Association. So we worked with them on this trail segment within Campbell's Ferry that the existing trail that we have now is the red line. And essentially in that box, we wanted some survey conducted to identify where some potential three blaze trail may have been. we didn't have a ton of information for this section. And so we had to rely on what we did have. And one thing was this map, this hand-drawn map from 1908 that we were using to try and ascertain, okay, where was it in between which drainages, where do we want to look? And yeah, this is just a photograph of Campbell's Ferry much later in the 1950s, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of the site. So Art, Dave, and John, do you guys want to take it from there?
Yes, I'll be talking, and Dave's going to move our photos for us. So Dave, I'm ready for my first photo. So while Dave pulls the photo up, a little bit of history. Last September 2019, Art, myself, and Dayton Young were asked to go look for the missing part of the trail above Campbell's Ferry. We sort of played with the weather, trying to find a good temperature range so we wouldn't become too dehydrated in the heat. So September is when we went. We were flown into Campbell's Ferry, and then, we were flown into Chamberlain Basin, and then walked part of the existing Three Blaze Trail, including Highline Ridge. And so here you can see the tree in the middle has 3 blazes on it. This is current trail that you can go out and walk. It's maintained and in good shape. And so we were excited to see our first 3 blaze tree. This is more modern blazes. You can see they're nice and square compared to the ones that Morgan showed that look more like they were just scraped off the side of the tree. Next. As we walked across the Highline Trail, we started getting views out across the burns. The hill that you see just left of center is Burnt Knob, and down to the right of Burnt Knob is a saddle, and we were expecting the trail to go through that saddle. And a little further off to the right is what's called Wet Meadows, and was the site of the Shake Cabin. And we walked down near the Shake Cabin and camped there our first night. Next. The next morning we got up and started, this trail shows our GPS track, the dark blue line with waypoints that we took, and also there's arrows showing directions. But we had to think about where to start looking, and we were trying to think like sourdoughs. We're trying to think like people who are riding horses and carrying a lot of gear. And one of the things that those sourdoughs did, as Morgan mentioned, is they were trying to get somewhere. They were trying to be efficient. So when we noticed that the trail, the dashed line here, the current trail, takes a 90-degree turn and heads further north, we thought, well, that must be a turn from the original trail. So we just walked up, and notice the GPS track is actually on the current trail. The map has the dashed lines just slightly off. But we just went straight when the trail turned right. And then we fanned out like we were on search and rescue. And that put us, we were walking 50 or 100 feet apart looking for signs of a trail. And it didn't take us long before we found tread. Next slide. Now you have to have trail eyes on here, but there's a trail going right down the middle of the picture. And Dave's moving the cursor on there. Thank you, Dave. And being experienced ITA people where we clear trails, this is something that we do a lot, is look for trails that are buried in downfall and brush. So there you have it. So we were really excited to see this, and it was obviously tread. And we're like, okay, well, we need confirmation. We need to see blazes on this tread. Next photo. And there's Dayton standing behind a tree with blazes on it, and the tree's dead, so it hasn't changed too much. But we wanted to make sure that those marks on the tree weren't just accidental injury or illness. So next shot. When you look inside those marks, you can see axe marks. There's a nice little cut there where somebody's obviously used a sharp tool to create those. So we knew that it was a 3-blaze tree. Next photo. When we were following the trail through the nice green woods, it was actually pretty easy to follow once we established that we were on it. But shortly thereafter, we came into a burn area, and the burn made our work difficult. If you look in the middle, just to the right of center, Art's actually in the picture there. He's standing on a piece of trail that he's found. I'm standing on a piece of trail that I found. But in between, you'd be hard pressed to find anything. It was, we call this pickup sticks, where the trees are just laying one on top of the other. When we were originally asked to go look for the trail, we were asked, well, do you think you could find a trail through stuff like this? And I responded that, well, if you can see the ground, we might be able to find it. Next photo. But we made our way through the pickup sticks. We were still in a burn area, and we were finding old dead trees that were burnt that still had blazes. So here's Art showing off a blaze. We like to put people in the picture so you can see the size of things. And again, there's still a lot of downfall. This picture is very close to the saddle that's just north of Burnt Knob. From there, the trail got very thin. You can see the ridgeline behind. That's where we need to go. But in the burn, it's a grassy area on a fairly steep hillside, and there were no trees standing. And so we couldn't find any real sign of trail, but we knew that the sourdoughs had to get out to that ridge to go down the ridge. So again, we fanned out to try to find some sign of previous travel. And we knew that when we got to the ridge would be narrow, and we were expecting the top of the ridge to be more helpful. Next picture. We did find more blazes. This is a log on the ground, which isn't very helpful. And then, ideally a blaze tree would have blazes on both sides to confirm that it was in fact blazed, but we couldn't roll this thing over, but we considered it a good sign. And we actually have lots of pictures of blazed trees, but they kind of look like blazed trees. So we'll move on. Next picture. So this is our GPS track of our search. The lower right-hand corner is where Shake Cabin and Wet Meadows are. You can see where we followed the new trail, the dash line, and we left it. And then we had consistent trail up to the saddle, and then there's a bunch of squiggles there because we walked all around. We found some cairns, we found some cut stumps and some other sign, and then we had lunch, and then we proceeded out onto the upper Trout Creek Ridge and down the ridge until we got to a point where the pickup sticks were so bad that we considered it hazardous to go down the ridge. And our plan had been to survey the upper part of the ridge on this day, and then the next day load up with full backpacks and go the rest of the way down the ridge. But after seeing those pickup sticks, we thought that carrying 40-pound packs through that, we could easily injure ourselves. And remember, we're out in the middle of the wilderness, and with poor communications, we could be in real trouble. So we went back up on a slightly different path, again, looking for more signs. And we found lots of questionable sign. Is this tread? We couldn't really tell. Is this a blaze? It's not clear. And so the part that you see is a little loop up in the upper left-hand corner. We weren't exactly sure where the trail was. So we went back to camp and talked and decided to follow the new trail, the dash line, back to Campbell's Ferry the next day. So that's what we did. So the next morning we got up and started walking the new available what's marked as 3 Blaze Trail on the map. Next photo. So this is walking down that trail, and from Wet Meadows down to Campbell's Ferry, you have to drop about 4,000 vertical feet. It's a long ways down to the salmon. And I don't remember the mileage, but it's considerable. So it was a long day of hiking. But we were looking across the ridge that's in the near ridge. I guess it's sort of in the middle distance, really. Yes, Dave's indicating it. That's Trout Creek Ridge. That's where the Three Blaze Trail is supposed to be. And notice the talus slide area higher on the ridge. We had looked off of that. So we'd been up in there, and then we'd gone off maybe another mile down the ridge before we had turned around on what would have been yesterday. And so we were looking over there and trying to speculate about where the trail might be. So there was a lot of talk on our way down the ridge. Next photo. So we finally got down to Campbell's Ferry, and this is looking back up at the lower part of the Trout Creek Ridge from Campbell's Ferry. And we looked up there and we went, wow, that looks like easy walking once you get up on top of the ridge. But the face of the ridge was very, very steep. And you remember the picture that Morgan showed of the horses going up the hillside. And that's what it is. It's very steep, it's grassy. Although, again, the whole thing was 120 years ago. So we don't know what it looked like then. We know there's been at least several forest fires around Campbell's Ferry in the last 50 years. And we don't know what happened prior to that. Next photo. So this picture is from this May. We had a great flight out from Campbell's Ferry last September. We were really excited about going back. We were really excited that ITA could arrange for us to go back and complete our job. We felt like we hadn't really done our job because we hadn't found the whole trail. So it was a super opportunity in May to go back. So we went back and we sort of had a plan and some ideas of where the trail might be. We'd been looking at Google satellite images and whatnot. We re-looked at all the old information that Morgan supplied us and sort of pieced it together. This lower section just above Campbell's Ferry, above the ranch, has been grazed, it's hunted, it's been burnt a couple times. And so there was always a question about, what these lower trails were. Is this a game trail? Is this a hunter's trail? But there's a trail there, and I've put little red dots just to the left of the trail to help you see it going through the woods. Next shot. When we got a little bit higher above the trees, the trail became a little more obvious. And again, there's little red dots in there if you look up the hillside. And this is this the same hillside in Morgan's shot? We can't tell. It's been 120 years. The trees have changed. It's a slightly different angle, but it's the same kind of terrain that her picture shows. Next shot. So this is a little further up the ridge. Again, the red dots are to the left of the tread. The tread was actually pretty good walking and a reasonable grade. And those are things that we look for on a good hiking trail, and we assume that the sourdoughs going to Thunder Mountain would want the same sort of thing. They don't want to go up something too steep. They want to have a steady grade. They don't want ups and downs, and game trails tend to wander around a little bit. This seemed a lot more like a human trail to us. Next shot. As we got further up the ridge, there's one hillside where the ridge isn't continuous, and you have to climb the hillside to get up on top of the ridge. Again, there's red dots here. It's a little hard to see because there's a fair amount of growth happening. It was spring and it was nice weather, but the red dots are showing tread that went all the way across that bowl over onto the far ridge, and then did a switchback and went back up to the upper left-hand corner of this hillside at about the same grade. And again, elk don't do switchbacks. Next photo. Once we got on the ridge crest, the going was really good. The angle dropped and there was obvious tread in places. This photo was shown in the newspaper, and it's a crosscut saw blade that's stuck in a tree. One end of the blade is broken off. So what we thought was, well, the saw broke, and they just said, well, forget it, we'll just walk away because it was stuck. This is not. We don't believe this is a remnant left over from the Campbell trail building effort, because the saw is not fully embedded in the tree. We think the tree would have grown around the saw a lot more than it had. but it was still interesting. And again, there's been forest fire crews up here. There's been a number of people who might have been trying to cut that tree. My daughter joked about how those kids and their electronic devices, Art and I were both eagerly marking our GPSs for where that tree was. Next photo. So now we're up on top of the ridge. Obviously this is burnt. You can see the snag on the left-hand side. So we don't know, were there trees here before? The soil here is pretty good, and we're no longer on a steep hillside, so it stays in place. And we thought there was an obvious trail here. You know, when the tread doesn't step over rocks and whatnot, somebody has cleared this a little bit. Next shot. And here's another piece of tread up on top of the ridge. It was very pleasant walking up there. You know, little bits of shade, little grass, great views everywhere. And we kept following tread. So we were really excited. It was pretty continuous and up on this part of the ridge. Next shot. Unfortunately, we ran out of luck on the good trail. And again, here's where our ITA experience came in. Art is on trail and I'm on trail, but there's so much brush, you know, there's manzanita, there's so much downfall. You can see it stacked one log on top of another. And it was steep. The picture doesn't really show how steep it is. It was a lot of work. And we just had our fingers crossed that when we got to those green trees over there, remember I said that it's a lot easier to follow the trail when it's in the forest. Had our fingers crossed that it would be much better trail finding when we got over there. So we were following bits of tread and we got over into the woods. Next slide. And there was really good trail in the woods. We were just super stoked. So at this point, we've climbed almost 4,000 feet above the ferry and we're getting tired, but we're really feeling encouraged. And it was only about 200 yards later that we ran into this huge pile of deadfall. And I climbed up on top of it to see what was on the other side. And Art said, "Are you really going up there?" And I said, "Oh boy, I don't know." So we sat down and had a little lunch, and Art was looking at his GPS. He goes, "You know, from my track from last year, we're only 100 feet away from where we quit last year." And so all of a sudden we both had big grins on our face and we were very, very happy. We felt like we'd closed the trail up and it was time to head down. Next shot. So this is our track from this particular day, this May. And we started at Campbell's Ferry. We followed the current trail, took the bridge across Trout Creek, wandered around on the hillside a little bit, and then hooked up with what we thought was good tread. The trail's a little bit different, particularly just to the right of where it says PB 42, because that was a switchback. And on the way down, we missed the trail because the grass is fairly deep and it was a really steep hillside. So we did a little bit different route on the way down, but you can see most of the way we were following the exact same trail. And then remember the GPSs have a margin of error. So sometimes you can walk on the same trail and it'll look like it's 10 or 15 feet apart. But we made it up, you can see up to about 6,100 feet or so. And the Campbell's Ferry is at 23,300 or 2330. So big effort, big day, and we were really tired when we got back, but super happy. Next picture. This map shows Campbell's Ferry on the left and the Shake Cabin site on the right in wet meadows. So what this map is, it's our track from 2019 connected with our track from 2020. And you can see there's a waypoint right in the middle where they join. And so we felt very strongly that we'd put together the missing piece of the Three Blaze Trail. So we'd had a really good day, but we were tired. But the next day we had another day. We had anticipated needing more time to do this ridge. So doing it in a single day, we were really excited. But the next day, Art was interested in following a trail up Little Trout Creek. And so I'm going to turn it over to Art and let him talk about that. The Little Trout Creek is just north of where our red trail is.
Thank you, John. So what we've got here is one of the old Forest Service maps, I think from the 1920s. And you have two trails leading down to the ferry, Campbell's Ferry. The northern, yes, it's on the right there. Dave's got the cursor on it. That is not the trail that we had come down from the previous day. That would be the more southerly trail right there. So we walked up to Little Trout Creek and across the creek on the new trail and went about 100 feet to a moderate sized ponderosa and got on Little Trout Creek Trail, which is at least down low, was actually in quite good condition. I believe it's probably used pretty well by hunters at times. It's a lovely little drainage with meadows and not actually very steep, and follows the creek, which all would lend itself to people that were packing supplies up to Chamberlain Basin or Thunder Mountain, what have you. They could stage, you probably follow that creek at least 800, 1,000 foot above Campbell's Ferry. And so you get to have water that much longer on your journey, and campsites. Anyway, so we followed that up about 1.5 miles after crossing Little Trout Creek. Next slide, Dave. And if you could put your cursor on that waypoint there. So this is approximately where Little Trout Creek splits. And we took the left-hand side, followed the trail, which is pretty much what the old maps show, near as I can tell. So we went on up that trail. It continued on pretty well, easy to follow. And next slide. Okay, so what we're looking at is the Little Trout Creek drainage right down there. And this is taken from the new trail. And this was taken in the fall of 2019. Just to show you, and the far ridge top is the, actually, if you go down to the right a little bit more, Dave, I think. No, I mean, down that ridge to the right. Anyway, that's pretty much where the Three Blaze Trail we'd explored the previous day. So there, in my mind, there were the one we'd done the day before was the original Three Blaze Trail, I feel, and then this other trail that we were exploring had been used for a much longer time because it's not as steep. It's just an easier trail to deal with. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to fully explore it, but we'll show you what we have. Next slide, please, Dave. So as we were going up the trail, we found this massive sheet metal riveted stove, which we decided to call it the pizza oven. Anyway, it's not a modern stove, but I do not understand why anybody would take something that heavy up there, but maybe there was a cabin up there at one time. Anyway, that was just one of the relics we found. Next slide. So we went up that trail to approximately where we thought it might leave the creek, because the maps show a switchback, a system of switchbacks beginning most of the way up Trout Creek. And it looked like the trail took off and went across the creek. I don't think we actually exited at the proper spot, because later on I found more evidence of the trail higher up. But here's where we left and decided to head for the ridge and try to find a switchback on the way. And it was a nice bushwhack. Wasn't anyway, it was a nice struggle added to our exercise of the day. Next slide. So anyway, we gained the ridge and parked ourselves above this little rock formation and had a little snack. And John proceeded on up the hill, and I finished up my lunch and decided to kick around on the hillside to my right from where we are right there. And lo and behold, I was actually, as soon as I turned the corner back onto the hillside, I was on a tread. So I surmised, and I walked down at about 150 feet. It was easy to follow. It was just on a lovely contour the whole way. And so I was, and it headed right back down into the creek, but at a nice contour. Anyway, I scooted back up there and followed John up the hill. Next slide, please. Anyway, we went up, I think John figured we went up maybe another 800,000 feet up and in altitude. And on the way, we ran into telephone wire, number 9, smooth galvanized number 9 wire, which was pretty much common for telephone wire back in the day. And I don't remember exactly where it went. Morgan would be much more adept at knowing where they strung wire, because I have seen a map of that. But anyway, we didn't find any more evidence. It was pretty steep, grassy, and but right above us, it according to the topo map, it evened out nicely and would have been much nicer walking. But you know, we're 3 old guys, and we kind of spent our wad the day before, and we went back out on it the next day, and we figured we'd done our duty for that day. So we went on back down. We went down the ridge, and instead of retracing our steps, and in an attempt to find more evidence of switchbacks, which we really, I didn't feel like we found much to report. Next slide. Okay, here we're back down at the crossing at Big Trout Creek, and I'm going to let John continue on with the rest of this.
So after our 2 days of chasing trail, we felt like we'd been successful, and we rested that evening, and that evening it rained. So we woke up in the morning and all the brush was wet. But one of the things we talked about is, how did they get across Trout Creek? This particular picture is from the bridge across Trout Creek looking downstream, but at a very mild spot. Almost everywhere else, it's whitewater and big boulders in the creek. It looked really sketchy. So we walked up the creek quite a ways to where there's currently a irrigation dam, and looked at that, thinking maybe that's where where they crossed the creek. It's not on the map here, but oh yeah, it is on the map there. Dave's showing the 2 waypoints. The upper waypoint is where the irrigation dam is. So we walked down the creek looking for places where you could get across, and it's really heavy brush, but every part of the creek we saw again was just heavy whitewater. And we got to the bridge. Go back to the bridge, Dave. And we talked about one theory was that maybe they just dropped a couple of trees across the creek because there's big ponderosas here. But then we were noticing around the bridge that there was, oh, we're changing pictures here. We missed it. Uh-oh. Please bear with us. We're having a technical problem. There we go. The next picture. Just downstream from the bridge, there we go. On both sides of the creek, there seem to be trails and sort of almost a ditch. And what we decided is there's a good chance that was a ford across the creek right there. Unfortunately, it was really brushy and really hard to get a picture. And so all I got was just Art scrambling up through the ditch. But that solved one of the issues that we'd been trying to figure out of how they got across, because they were using this trail almost year round. Next picture. We couldn't find trail that definitively connected from there to where I'm standing here. In this picture, we're standing where the old ferry was. There's trail and lots of sign that this was the ferry. There's a bunch of pictures that show it. And Doug Timms identified it for us and took us there. The other thing that is notable here is that if you look just to the right of the hat, there's a dark spot on the river. That's the new pack bridge across the river there. Now I'm going to turn this over to Dave, and Dave's going to talk a little bit about his experience.
Okay, thank you, John and Art. These guys did a great job of kind of showing some of the technical aspects of us searching for the trail artifacts. I'm going to throw a little color in here and show you kind of what went on behind the scenes. I didn't actually participate in the fall trip of '99. This was in the spring of May that I went in on this trip with them. Here we are, we're loading up. Obviously, John's got his mask. He's appropriately socially distanced here. And we're early morning at the McCall Airport, and we're getting ready to fly out for the day. We're staying at the cabin. We're not backpacking here. We're staying there at Campbell's Ferry. So we had a cooler, and we were able to take some adult beverages and some dinners and whatnot. So this is on the flight back into Campbell's Ferry, and one of the things you might really notice here is the snow. I mean, the high country has still had a ton of snow in it. This is the end of May last year. I believe we're looking at Storm Peak here, and this is the 20 Mile Lakes basin here as we flew across. We've talked about it a couple times, but I wanted to emphasize the verticality of this area is just incredible, just how steep and how much elevation that you deal with out here. As we drop into Campbell's Ferry here, this is the runway. What you're looking at right here is the other side of the canyon. The river is actually down here. The plane, when he flies in, he's got to fly up the river or down the river, make a 90-degree turn at the right exact spot, clear these trees here, and hit the runway. And I believe it's about an 800 or 900 foot runway, I want to say. Maybe it's a little longer than that. But completely surrounded by the tall trees and ponderosas. So it's quite an experience. Oh, and by the way, this runway is on a hill. It's about 19% coming up the hill. So it's essentially a controlled crash landing. Once at Campbell's Ferry, we met the Timms, and Timms brought their tractor up and hauled our backpacks and our bags and down to what they use as their guest cabin. It's the old friend Zen Miller cabin. It's one of the original structures on the Campbell's Ferry site. And many of you may be aware of how this works out there in Frank Church. The old private ranches and sites along the river were preserved as private property within the Frank Church. And so the Timms actually own this ground, and it's an island of private property out in the wilderness, and it's quite fabulous. So anyway, this is one of the original structures, and they've set it up as their guest house. So when they have guests come in, they have them stay here. The Timms were, Doug and Phyllis Timm were just an amazingly supportive of this venture. They've done such a great job of preserving this site and a lot of the historical artifacts that are in and around this site. This is a shot of the Campbell's Ferry area. This cabin off in the distance is the new. It's a more modern cabin. That's where the Tims live. This is their dog River. River loved to have some company, some new people to play with, I think, because he had instantly adopted us and was willing to hike with us all day, both days that we were hiking. And the Tims were glad to see him go burn some energy. We're looking up at the ridge where the Three Blaze Trail is up here just below the sunrise. And this is the ridge that we hiked up the first day, and then way up high is where they connected the two from the previous year. I'm shooting with a wide angle lens here, and so it doesn't give you a sense of the verticality of this area, but this is the area that's 4,000 plus feet above Campbell's Ferry here, and it's not a very far off in the distance. This is part of the ITA commercial. We didn't just hike all day and work super hard. There was moments of relaxation and enjoying where we were at. This is right after we'd flown in. We brought our bags and stuff in, and we decided we needed a cup of coffee before we headed up the hill. So we brewed up a pot of coffee and sat for a half hour and drank coffee before we prepared to go up the hill. While we were looking for a lot of trail remnants, I'm an amateur photographer, and I was going nuts with the wildflowers and some of the scenery. Here's a good shot that shows you some of the verticality of this ground as we're heading up the mountain. There's a salmon river in the bottom, and then this is the Campbell's Ferry area here. Lots of flowers, just incredible amounts of flowers. Again, it's the end of May, so and you can start to see some of the snow in the high country still as you start moving up the mountain. This is a shot from the ridge looking downriver. This is the ridge that the original Three Blaze Trail went up. And so looking down here, the new bridge or the bridge is approximately here. The original ferry crossing was here. They came up the river here and then crossed. The Three Blaze Trail, it crosses the river. Right now it crosses here and then goes up and then works its way back up to Dixie, up along this hillside here. But back in the day when they were crossing, did the same thing. It just came up the river here and crossed at this relatively uniform spot. And what they were looking for, I was curious, is what they were looking for is a good, steady, uniform current across the entire way. And they weren't necessarily looking for an eddy. They needed something that allowed that boat to move across as they moved the two ends of the line up and downstream. So what you're looking at here is a very blurry photo, and I apologize for that. But what we have down here is a mama bear and her cub, which moved in below us as we were heading up the ridge. Again, I didn't have my telephoto. I was just shooting with a 14 millimeter fixed lens. And so this is a pretty extreme digital blow up of that photograph. The full image, you can't even see the bears, but they were about a quarter mile below us, probably maybe 1,000 feet below us. And John and Art were further up the ridge, and I was working on some stuff down lower, and I saw the bears move below me, and I sat and I watched them for about an hour as they moved back across the hillside and further upstream. We mentioned the burns. This is the same ridge. Notice the burnt snags up here, but also notice on these ponderosas, this is a pretty typical ponderosa forest where you get a lot of low ground cover, and you get these fires raging up the hillside, and then you get some burn up the ponderosas, but the ponderosas don't get in the burn into the crown, and so they survive. It's quite a remarkable plant. Later in the day, we had a little shower moving in, so that was another reason we were happy to find the other end of the trail and scoot down the trail. We thought we may get into some thunder and lightning on top of this ridge, and we weren't excited about that. It never did come to fruition, and we ended up getting a few drops on us is all, so it was kind of nice. One of the things that I was most excited about was some nighttime photography here. We were lucky enough to be in there on a new moon, no moon in the sky. And so it offered a great opportunity to shoot the Milky Way. And if you look at a dark skies map, which shows the darkest skies in the lower 48 in the United States, Campbell's Ferry and the Frank Church Wilderness as a whole is probably at the bullseye of some of the darkest skies in the lower 48. And so it's a great opportunity. The few times I've been into the Frank Church, it's always fun to shoot the nighttime photography. Here's our cabin in the middle of the night. The one thing about the cabin or this nighttime photography is that the camera picks up so much more light than your eye does. I'd heard some rustling around and the light came on. This is about 3 in the morning and I was shooting this photograph, and it wasn't until I got it back home and processed this photograph that I realized that one of my hiking mates came out and photobombed me over here and was taking a nature break. A big shout out to the Tims again. They've done such a great job of caring for this site and preserving it. And they've actually put together a little historical museum in this barn. You go in there and it's just full of artifacts and different things that have happened. Probably the most disturbing thing that I found in there was pieces of a wreckage, an airplane wreckage that had crashed, and somebody did not do a good job landing at the airstrip, and they didn't haul out the wreckage, but he's got pieces of it in there. So that's always nice to see when you're scheduled to fly out the next day. So here's a shot on the last morning we were in. It was kind of a rainy, misty morning. Shot down on the river. You can see the river is really big because of the May runoff, but also the new bridge across here, which crosses over, and of course the trail continues on to Dixie. There's John. He hiked down. He's in his pajamas and his slippers. He's got a cup of coffee, and he's hiked down on the bridge and shooting some photography with me. And again, you can see the water's a little blurred out there. It's a slow shutter speed, and you can see the water's moving pretty fast underneath it. And another shot. It's a really impressive structure out in the middle of nowhere. And so there's only really 3 ways to visit Campbell's Ferry. One is to fly in, one is to pack in or to hike into it, and the other is to raft into it as well. And so a lot of the river rafters, the guides are dropping in, and they're stopping at Campbell's Ferry, and they hike up from the bridge, from the site there up to Campbell's Ferry, and the first thing you run into is this post with this custom-made bell on it. Underneath it is a sign that says, you're welcome to come and cross our private property and enjoy the wilderness and move on through the wilderness. Just ring the bell and let us know you're here. And a lot of times when you ring the bell, one of the Tims will come down and give you a guided tour of their museum. And so it's a pretty special experience. And I know a lot of the river rafters and the rafting companies enjoy coming in. Of course, this year, underneath the sign that says you're welcome was a sign that says due to COVID quarantining, we're not doing tours this year. So hopefully that changes real quick and they can get back and do that. Okay, last thing is, this is their mailbox. Once a week, the mail plane comes and drops their stuff off, and they can order groceries through their mail carrier, and they'll go grocery shopping and bring fresh vegetables and stuff to them, what they don't grow here at the site. And then here's a picture of our plane coming in to pick us up. The plane coming to Campbell's Ferry is a little bit like the cable guy. He's going to be there sometime in the morning. And so I had hiked up the hill to the top of the airstrip here and ended up waiting about an hour and 15, 20 minutes before the plane came in, and I was able to shoot a couple photographs. So with that, that concludes our presentation. I would like to offer, this is my website, if you want to jot down the name here. you can go to my search site here and search for Campbell's Ferry. And I've got 3 or 5 web pages here, and you can go through a bunch more pictures and some description of what we're doing. And also, I believe I've got John's website linked here as well, too. So you can go over to John's website. His is much more detailed report of what we did and has both trips on it as well. So with that, I will turn it back over to, I'm not sure who, but I think we're going to take a few questions for anybody who's still left out there.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And thanks to everybody who participated today in the panel, from the Forest Service and the folks who did the survey. Really, really cool project. If there's any questions, please put them up in the chat. Something to mention, the Tims wrote a great book about Campbell's Ferry and some of the other homesteads in that area. It's called Merciless Eden. I recommend checking that out. Let's see, what was Dave's website? So Dave, if you wanted to share your screen again, you could put your website back up there, or when we send out an announcement, maybe we can put that in our newsletter coming up. But yeah, thanks so much to everybody who participated. Please remember, our membership drive is happening right now. So please consider becoming a member today, or if nothing else, sign up for our newsletter. You'll keep informed about what's going on with our project schedule, what's going on with our webinar schedule. And Tom Helmer, I hear you. I got a message from Tom Helmer from the Idaho Parks and Rec. The Idaho Trail sticker is $10, not $15, and is now available at REI. So thank you so much to everybody who came tonight.